ninth meeting of the Tompkins Intergovernmental Relations Committee. We did move this from the usual meeting time of the 8th. So we're glad that we're able to accommodate Amanda Spellis's schedule today. So are there any changes to the agenda? Brittany, you have, Katrina, Brittany, have anything?
I don't have anything, just your resolution.
Okay, and are there any, is there any public comment?
No.
Okay, thank you so much. Then I'll just jump into Chair's report. First I wanted to mention that by moving this meeting to the Wednesday, we conflicted with the department heads meeting with the county administration. So Lisa expressed her regrets she wasn't able to join us this morning, but she did give me some thoughts on Raise the Age, which is the issue that one of the issues that we've been tracking for a while. She said she's been talking with Kit Kephart about Raise the Age on the issue of not enough beds in our region or maybe statewide. Apparently, they're still collecting background information. They'll be providing a full update to HHS soon. In the meantime, interestingly, the Office of Children and Family Services at the state has proposed a meeting with some of the regional DSS commissioners, and that'll be later this month. So that's kind of a piece of new news. So it wants to let us know that after she hears what OCFS has to say, then we'll get an update and sort of talk about a strategy in terms of advocacy. So she suggested that we talk about this in July. Lisa agreed it's an issue and an unnecessary burden that needs to be addressed. I think you remember that there's an estimate of $100,000 or $200,000 that might be required if we were to just reserve one of those beds for potential use. So, Deborah.
Yeah, Martha, as long as we're talking about this kind of need, there's a related issue. Ronnie's on the Youth Services Board, I think, or the Joint Youth Commission. I can never remember which one. But at last night's meeting, they picked up on a thread that's been discussed, I think, numerous times in this group, which is that we have no place to put homeless youth. And a big piece of this is that the safety regulations that the state imposes on any kind of facility that houses homeless youth are so burdensome, it just makes it impossible to come up with a solution to this problem. So no, it's a lot like the childcare regulations that make it so difficult for people to go into business. I think this is something, if we wanted to focus on something that might make a real difference in our community, that might be a possibility.
So in other words, the regulations, if we were to have specifically a homeless shelter, a shelter for 18 to 24.
Well, you can't even put them in a hotel, really, because they've got to have access to 2 emergency. I mean, we could put them up at that place in Albany where we because every room has 2 doors, you know, but yeah, it's just in the process of trying to make sure that we put them someplace super safe, we've created a situation where they have no place to go. So
that's a very interesting. Thank you for raising that. So you're not talking about youth in the criminal justice system. You're just talking.
No, I'm just talking about homeless youth.
Yeah.
Generally. And runaways, you know, people that get swept up into, you know, doing things that are really bad for them because they don't have any options. And
thank you, Deborah.
Offer them.
All right, thanks. I've made a note of that. Mike Lane?
Yeah, 2 things. I wondered, at one point, I think Leslin didn't want us to meet during the summer. Are we still meeting in the summer?
Well, the June, you know, the legislative
it's fine with me. I mean,
yeah, the legislative session is still going on. You know, she and I agreed early on that we certainly needed to meet throughout period. I think we had, I'm not really sure. I think we had talked about maybe skipping a July meeting or skipping an October meeting, something like that. I haven't heard anything specifically from her. I think if we want to collectively decide if we have material to talk about at the next meeting, we should decide.
The other thing, I would just comment on Deborah's remark, which is a good one, but TCA, Tompkins County Action, built that facility for young people that didn't have housing. Are we talking a different group than that?
That's permanent supportive housing for about 24 young people. I think the need is much bigger. And I think, not, and young people may be sort of temporarily homeless. It's not that they're, where there's a family, we've heard stories of, for example, a family disruption and they, as Deborah said, run away. There's nowhere for them sort of on a temporary basis. So I've heard this issue for a long, long time because, for example, there are issues about keeping adults and young people separate and, alcohol and drug abuse, et cetera. There's a lot of complicating factors. So this may be one of those issues. I mean, there's some of these issues cross other committees' work, HHS or public safety. This is something maybe we can talk about with other committees and sort of see what the update is and if there's an opportunity for us to do any advocacy. Katrina, on the meeting issue?
Yes, we have a meeting scheduled for July 13th, but there is not a meeting scheduled for August.
Okay.
When does the legislature come back in session?
They don't usually come back in till the end of till January.
Oh,
Sometimes they're called back in a special session for something unusual. Thank you for that, Katrina. The one issue we had talked, and I was going to talk about this under kind of future discussions for the committee. We have not paid much attention to the fall when the executive budget is put together, when the governor's office does their heavy lifting. And that really is the critical time that shapes what gets handed to the legislature. So it may be something, and when we were at TC3 last week, that came up as an issue where really we should be trying to influence those decisions in the fall rather than wait till January and February. So, I was going to go through a couple of other things and do the redistricting resolution before we kind of get into what's the future of this committee. But if you want to continue to talk about that right now, that's fine too. Deborah?
yeah, I was just going to suggest that it makes sense to take July and August off and come back in September when they start working on that budget and we start working on our budget, and we'll be in a pretty good position to know what we want to push, at least in terms of the budget.
There's also I learned yesterday that NISAC is going to have an in-person conference in Syracuse in September.
Oh, cool.
So there's an idea about putting resolutions forward that NISAC committees might consider. In which case a September meeting by us would be too late. But Henry?
Do we have access to the executive during the fall?
That's a very interesting question. I think it's something where we'd be in, I think we'd kind of work through NISAC, work with them. I don't know. There also may be things left over from this legislative session that will kind of not be resolved yet. I'm thinking about, for example, the whole marijuana legislation. I mean, we don't know anything about that yet, and what that's going to mean locally. So are there things that we want to track, and what's the right timing for that? So, I would really be interested in what you all think is the right thing to do. As far as access to the executive, we would certainly, let's say TC3, community college funding, we would certainly work through their association and work with Dr. Montague and their team, and try to amplify whatever their messages are. We've been successful in the past of getting meetings with people on the second floor in the executive branch. We've been very successful with that. So there's no reason we couldn't focus on that and try to make a point of it, make a real push. So I guess for that reason, if we were interested in doing something like that, I would be reluctant to cancel both the July and have no meeting in July and August. But Mike, were you going to say something? Lane? Okay.
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted.
The Zoom body language, somebody leans forward. Say something. Okay. Well, I tell you what, since we have a July meeting on the schedule, I would just propose, let's leave that for now, and look at what an agenda will look like. And, if we really don't have anything to talk about, we'll cancel that meeting. It's sort of easier to cancel one than to set one up, if there's no objection to that. Okay. All right. So in the meantime, I think I would, maybe I'll talk to Shauna in particular about these couple of youth issues and see if there's anything where we want to collaborate, or at least sort of be aware of when they're having presentations on those issues.
Should you also talk to, I know that that Raise the Age is also in the public safety realm too. And so should you also talk to Rich John about that?
I know, it's like we need to be like a committee of the whole for everything.
Well, no, it's just that I know that that's where I got most of the Raise the Age stuff from, because it affects Matt and the sheriff, since the sheriff's office is sort of the de facto Raise the Age building.
Right. No harm in connecting with both of them, which I will do. All right.
Do we know whether they've talked about maybe combining with other counties to reserve in group rooms, or room, like basically like we pay a third, they pay a third, and other county pays a third?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
That would seem like, maybe that would make some sense too.
Well, we had a really good logical idea and the state's got it, so.
Well, it sounds like the state expected more young people to need this kind of housing than turned out. That's a good thing. It sounds like there maybe is capacity if beds aren't managed the way they are, where people just reserve one and hold it open. So maybe if OCF is stepping in, and they might be being a little bit more supportive in organizing this, maybe that can be managed without constructing new beds.
Maybe we could get a sublet.
Right.
Sublet. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
A joint sublet.
We'll piggyback on Skylar's lease.
Like a short-term rental.
Yeah, Airbnb.
Oh, okay, kids. That's exactly what it is. All right. How about we go to the redistricting resolution? And I did send something around yesterday with a slight change. Would somebody be willing to move that resolution? Moved by Henry, seconded by Deborah. And the change in the title that I suggested is, well, the title is urging that New York State's 2021 redistricting process follow the borders of Tompkins County and place Tompkins County completely into one congressional district and one state Senate district. That's resolution ID 10169. So I did try to take the comments that Mike Sigler and Henry had sent. Hope you saw that in the 7th whereas I added some language. While it's understood that counties must sometimes be divided in order to distribute population relatively evenly across districts, I added that. For decades, Tompkins County has been subject to being split apart. And then I mentioned in the first resolve, added that we'd like to maintain, Tompkins would like to maintain its intact status within the 125th Assembly District. So that's just to clarify what the differences are. Discussion?
Do we know what's going to, do we know the logic behind the the vote on, in November, from changing it from what, 75, 2/3 to 60%?
Do I know what the logic is? What the public logic is or the probable logic? So Henry's talking about a measure that was passed by the legislature and is put on the referendum for November. You know, the realities have changed since the redistricting process. The independent commission was set up in 2011 or whenever it was. And I'm sorry, the law was originally passed, as we said, approved by voters in 2014.
Right.
So that I think the idea is that 60% approval by the legislature is certainly better than a majority, significantly better than a majority. And it was felt that that was sufficient. I think the idea of speeding up the process may have to do with the fact that the census data are so late. So it's going to be a very compressed calendar already. So.
Okay.
Mike, anybody else? Mike.
I like the resolution. I thought it was a nice job. I think the community of interest point is very well laid out. And we do have a strong community of interest with particularly the counties to our northern area. I think much stronger than we do to those lying west of us. And so I certainly would support moving ahead with this.
Thank you, Mike. I will report also that I spoke with Hal McCabe. He's the mayor of Homer, but that's not why I spoke with him. He works for Senator Rachel May from Onondaga County area. As you remember, Charlie Krasansky had suggested that we talk to Senator May's office as the majority senator who's closest to us geographically. He said that he says, we don't think the Senate is going to have very much say in all of this. We don't know anything other than that. We don't anticipate that, so I'm just reading from an email he sent me. We don't anticipate that they will start releasing maps for the Senate to look at until the fall. And at that time, I think we need to vote twice to reject them if there are big issues, but the whole process is not surprisingly very opaque. I wish it were not. I wish I had more to report. Their senators are not, they had a meeting with the senators on this issue. The senators are not even sure what will happen with their own districts. So it's not even, it's very personal for all of them. Senator May's chief of staff did throw cold water on my hope that they would challenge the loss of the congressional seat. I guess many times over the years, states have challenged such things, but never once won. I think that's interesting because it is about missing out on on preserving all of our congressional seats based on an 89 vote difference. Remember that soon after the data came out, Governor Cuomo said we're going to look into a lawsuit, and I haven't heard anything else about that, to sue about those lines. Has anybody else heard anything about a lawsuit going forward? I think if they felt that there were grounds, we probably would have heard it by now. So it seems like these are the numbers that we're going to have. In any case, they are, there will be a change in, especially, in the congressional configuration. And since our member is retiring, it seems pretty logical that our district will be one that will be shifted. So,
Martha,
yeah, go ahead.
so if the Senate isn't going to have much to say about this, if that's what you're hearing, then shouldn't we be directing our lobbying efforts directly toward the independent commission? For example, shouldn't this resolution, should we pass it, be sent on? Do we know the right contact up there to do that with? There must be a staff of some kind.
Or do we know how to reach the individual members?
Well, I have their names in the last resolved. And I would work with staff to figure that out. Even the issue of their funding and the staffing apparently is controversial, which is really kind of upsetting, that they say they have not been able to get organized yet. Now, Henry, you have a subscription to the Albany Times Union, right?
Yes.
Okay, because every time I go there, I get locked out. If you want to try to research this, see if you can find out anymore. They seem to do the best job of anybody covering what's happening with this commission. So it would be important that they're supposed to have public hearings. This is not supposed to be an opaque process. It's supposed to specifically be a transparent process. So I certainly would take it on as something that we need to follow up. This is not just pass the resolution and wipe our hands of it. So NISAC is probably trying to track it as well. So this is the first step, and I would suggest that we follow this up.
Okay, I will.
I mean, it seems really silent right now, but stuff must be happening, and it will happen fast once they get the data. Is this September they expect to get the data? Is that the new deadline? Mike, do you know?
They
Okay.
supposedly, but who knows?
Okay. All right. Is there anything else about the resolution? Ready to vote then? Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Deborah.
Yes, and thanks, Martha, for writing it.
Sure, you bet. Mike Lane
Yes.
and Henry.
Yes.
I'm a yes, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. That's good. All right, so we do have time. We're waiting for, we know that Amanda was not able to join us till 10:45. So we do have some more time. Did we want to talk some more about other topics that would be of interest to this committee and we think would help the county? Deborah.
Yeah, I know that that Mike and Henry and you and I were all at the meeting with TC3, but Mike Sigler was not. And I just wanted to fill him in on one issue that came up. They were briefing us, Mike, on a workforce and career development initiative. They want to expand their curriculum offerings to better serve a demographic that's looking for a micro-credential or some kind of vocational training to change jobs. And it's a really good and well thought out program. But what we learned in the process of discussing it is that when they put together a new program for a micro-credential, for example, even when another college in the state system already has an identical program, it can take up to 2 years for the university system to approve it and let them move forward with it. And that's just ridiculous. I mean, I hate to sound, I'm turning into a Republican when it comes to regulatory issues, but the more I learn about all the regulatory roadblocks to good things that we could be doing, the more annoying it is. And that was something that we thought we might want to take up with the state system for future reference. So just so you know.
That feeds directly into something Henry sent me about 10 minutes ago, 10 minutes before the meeting. Do you want to tell folks about the article that you found, Henry?
Yeah, I found an article this morning from the Albany newspaper that that the state received $163 million from the federal government for childcare, for paying for cleaning supplies and also paying for essential workers for childcare. This group said that they only spent $31 million of it. And so they said that many other states like Delaware and Pennsylvania have gotten all their money out, while New York State has not gotten more than 25%. But New York State responded that, oh, it's just a point in time, and that they've released like 75 million, which is still not even half of the money that they released. They said that 1,500 child cares went under during the time. Many of them were owned by minorities or women. And so, you know, they said that again, it was bureaucracy that basically slowed them down to get the money out. They had all these requirements and everything else, and that no one could in fact navigate the ways. And so I don't know what we can do about it, but maybe we can put some pressure on them to basically say, yeah, I mean, this is ridiculous that you're sitting on all this federal money for over a year, and not paying for essential childcare workers who have higher costs, and also all these other businesses going out of business. And so it just exacerbates the problem. And maybe, you know, again, OCFS is the main culprit here, and maybe we can chat with someone there about this issue.
Henry, if you could copy that and send it
Sure.
to all of us, that'd be great. Mike Lane and Deborah.
I just wondered, Henry, what we're hearing, of course, is that it's not even so much the subsidies for the daycare, having daycare for children, as much as trying to have enough providers. That we're down on numbers of daycare availability.
Yes.
Is this money? Can that money be used? Did it say for trying to start up any home daycares?
I do not know, because they said that money was focused on paying for essential workers daycare and for paying for cleaning supplies for other daycares. But I don't know whether the money can also be used to start up daycares. We could maybe investigate that. But again, the fact that they didn't spend the money probably hurt the fact that there's not as many daycare centers. And so,
Was this the original CARES Act money? Is that what they're talking about? Because that was like last fall. That was the
yeah,
first.
I guess it was like last spring and summer is when the funding
Okay.
became available.
Yeah, I
And-
remember talking with Sue Dale Hall about it. And Mike, I don't think it was so much capital to start new ones. That's an option under the American Rescue Plan. I think it was more about, it was enhanced subsidies for for families to pay for childcare.
Right.
Which is great if it exists, right? It was, as you said, Henry, help for the cleaning supplies and PPE, and maybe modifications if they had to change their buildings or the HVAC systems. I don't think that bucket was so much about new slots to be developed. We could bring Sue Dale Hall in. I mean, she's really, really is on top of these things. And frankly, she and her association might really need some juice to advocate for what they need. Because I think one of the things is it's complex. People say, oh, there's all this money for childcare, but there's so many restrictions on it. And whether it's the federal government putting the restrictions on or the state government, she would be better educated to tell us.
Yeah, it seemed like it was the state putting restrictions on it. Because again, Delaware and I think Pennsylvania have given out all their money. And so it doesn't seem like it's federal restrictions, it seems like it's state restrictions.
Right. Deborah?
Yeah, and this dovetails right into the debates we're going to be having about using the ARP funding. Because when HED met last week and so many businesses came in and talked about how they couldn't hire workers. In the last couple of weeks, we've had articles in the Times and the Times Weekly about the problems people are having hiring people. And in both articles, childcare is an issue. It would be a good use of at least some of our ARP funds if we could figure out a way to provide stimulus in terms of capital input and entrepreneurship to get new businesses started. But if the state has money for, say, scholarships for people to use childcare, it would be a lot easier to convince people, it would seem to me, that they should take advantage of an opportunity to open their own business if they knew that they had people waiting to fill those slots. So that's a way certainly to use the state money to leverage our ARP funds.
That's great. I agree with that totally. I think we just identified the agenda for July.
Yeah,
Oh, well, thank goodness you won't have to do any work, Martha.
do we know from the woman Jude at CDC whether or not, again, I think I had raised this issue before, whether or not it's due to a lack of spots or due to a lack of demand for childcare?
It's
Whether or not
spots.
it's spots.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Sue's been banging on that drum for a while, and she's right.
Yeah. And Jude's work has been just to like preserve what we have and not lose any
Right.
more. Yeah. Sue
Right,
told
but
Sue,
Go ahead.
something, the big picture, like since she's been working on this, something like we've lost hundreds of not just slots, but hundreds of providers, of family providers, which is really the most flexible, the most sort of comfortable for infant and toddler care very often.
But that's regulatory as well, Martha.
A lot of regulatory.
All the same issue.
Yeah, it's complex, and I hope the conversation. This is one of those things that I hope the pandemic will change is the understanding that workforce depends on childcare. Duh. It's like, so, but this fact of New York State socking away the money, that seems to be built into this administration's DNA. If you remember hearing from Anna Callis, when she got to Albany, she found out it was the hospital fund, right? The hospital fund, where they took our sales tax and said, we're going to create the special distressed hospital fund. It didn't exist. Hospitals
Yeah, they just held on to it.
any money. So she rattled the cage at the comptroller's office, and suddenly, oh, okay, now there's a fund. And I guess.
Well, what about our Medicaid?
She also rattled the cage on that one, on Medicaid reconciliation. She went to the comptroller's office, went to Blake Washington, who's the assembly key finance professional, and explained the whole thing to him. He wasn't aware of it. So it seems, and I guess we don't know yet from administration whether we're actually getting that money or if they've just shown us 4 numbers, which is at least a step in the right direction. So this issue of funds coming from one place intended for something that end up either not getting used or some other way it's a real issue. It seems to show up over and over again. Now,
And there was a child advocacy group that thought a Freedom of Information Request Act that got the amounts of how much New York did not spend.
okay, was that in that Albany Times Union article?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay.
I look forward to seeing that, Henry.
Okay, and Sue Dell Hall retires, I think, at the end of August. So
Yeah.
in July. That sound like a plan? Okay. This really can't be, we really need to raise the temperature on this. Thank you very much for bringing that up to Henry, for finding that article.
Sure.
Yeah. So any other committee members' reports? Okay. I would also point out that CLCPA is also an issue that where, the Climate Leadership Act, where there's a whole lot going on. I know Peak and the Case Board are tracking that as well. So we probably don't really have to dive into it. But I think there's also a role in following up on the civil service issues, the resolutions we passed last month, and checking with NISAC about where that stands. So there's some follow-up to do, and definitely an effort to try to figure out who in the administration is the right, who are the right people to talk to about these different issues. As remember, Charlie Krasansky thought last month that by this month we'd have a different governor, perhaps. So
He actually said by July.
yeah, right. Okay, by July. Henry, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering since the infrastructure bill seems to have taken another move, we can talk to Amanda about it, but are we preparing to do anything with that whenever it gets passed, or if it gets passed?
Well, I think we don't know yet how those funds are proposed to be spent. Is it would it be competitive grants? Would it be through existing federal revenue streams, which I guess a lot of it might be through existing streams. Our planning department, for example, is very well tuned to a lot of those federal programs. I know, for example, on disaster mitigation and recovery. So, we can ask her, what the thinking is on how that money would move. I think that would be good to do. It is, we had the earmark process where
Right.
Congressman Reed asked for requests and Schumer and Gillibrand asked for requests. We could touch base with her on those. And the way Amanda explained it to Leslyn and me, maybe like a month or so ago, it wasn't like the old member items of state government where somebody had a bank account and they could approve grants and just hand it out. It was more that proposals that would go to different committees would get kind of, whether it's sort of a recommendation letter by Senator Schumer, or sort of thumb on the scales by Senator Gillibrand, that then it would go through the process. So those decisions would get made in, say, August for the normal, if there's such a thing as normal federal budget process. So, if anybody's got wisdom on how the infrastructure bill would get administered, please share. It gets passed. So, all right, if there's nothing else, then I think there's, it might be worth bringing Anna back in, or maybe bring her into the committee meeting to give us an update. How did the session look to her? What was her experience like, and where we should be focused? That would also be something we could profitably spend time on. Deborah.
Yeah, I don't know what you what you had planned to discuss with Amanda, but I was wondering if we could learn a little bit more about this R&D bill that the Senate passed yesterday, because I'm not sure I understand how that interplays with the initiatives on infrastructure and business. Although I gather that it faces a uphill climb in Congress, in the House, so maybe it's not worth learning about. I don't know.
My sense is that there are differences, but it didn't, from the news I heard, didn't sound like they were reconcilable differences. I mean, let's absolutely ask her about this. I think it sounds like it's grants to support particular projects, even, industrial developers who are in a position to stand up supply chain infrastructure.
And a lot of tech as well, which, given Cornell's presence in the community, would certainly seem to be something that would help us. Where are Charlie and Diane this month?
They got meetings. Charlie's coming in at
11:30.
11:30. I think Diane will be able to join us by around 11. Rosie's
Well,
here.
maybe we can ask them how this looks like, because they're probably tracking it.
They probably looked at it. Yeah. Henry.
Yes, I also know that the legislature is working on parole reform and bail reform allegedly. I mean, we can talk to Charlie about the last minute changes or last minute opportunities for that.
Mhm. Yeah, there seems
Because,
a lot going on there.
yeah, and that really, I mean, that seems to be the only, I mean, because the legislature ends when? Does it end on Friday?
What's today? I think tomorrow is their last day.
Oh, so I assume New York healthcare is not going to get included.
I don't think so. This is early. They usually end a week or two later than this. I'm not sure why the calendar is what it is. Mike Lane?
I would be interested in hearing anything that she can tell us about the tax bill, particularly the capital gains tax proposals. That will have a huge impact locally. I remember when the capital gains went up, I guess the mid 80s, and we had activity out the ears of people trying to sell their properties to still have the old capital gains rate. In fact, as I had someone in my office this week who said, I've decided I'm going to sell because I'm afraid they're going to raise the capital gains rate, and I want to take advantage of the lower rate right now. And so that can affect our economic development also. People may not want to invest as heavily if they're going to have a higher capital gains rate. So that's my thought.
You mean ask Amanda about that?
Yeah, of what she's hearing on that. I mean, a lot of things in flux. Taxes being proposed by the president to increase the capital gains rate, and of course the corporate rates. There's been some kind of a G7 agreement about that, which is important. Hopefully that can be enforced. But does that just mean we're going to have more companies in the Cayman Islands?
No, that's a really interesting initiative, and it has to be ratified by Congress. So there's a long way to go before it actually would take effect. I mean, a lot of other players have to weigh in. I've heard that there's also concern about that it sort of builds in inequities into the system too. So it's very complex. They've been working on it a long time, and it'll be interesting to follow that. So, but I know that with the infrastructure bill, I think the press often focused on the cost and how, that Biden's here and the Republicans are here. I think the bigger sticking
And
point,
Joe Manchin's over there.
I think the bigger sticking point was how they would pay for it. You can split the difference on two numbers, but it's a qualitative difference, you know, where the money's going to come from. And that seemed to me the bigger hurdle. So should we take a minute and take the minutes of the May 11th meeting?
Sure.
Moved by Henry, seconded by Deborah. Comments, questions?
There she is.
Thank you, Katrina. Hi, Amanda, for another good record of what we've discussed. A vote on the minutes. Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes,
Henry,
Yes.
and I'm a yes, so the minutes are unanimous. Amanda, welcome. Right on time.
Hi, sorry, I was
Wow.
mid-breakfast sip. Good morning, good afternoon. It's morning, it's morning.
It's great to see you. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for working with me on my crazy schedule.
No, it's great. You know, we'll do anything to get you to get on your dance card. So we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we know there's nothing going on at the federal level. You're
No, I'm actually, can't tell the oceans behind me. I'm here at the beach, so. It is we just started our June, you can believe it, work period, and it is shaping up to be a very busy month, and definitely is going to be a busy summer, for sure.
Well, we're happy to just open this up to you and, you know, tell us what you think are the big things we should be following. We have a number of questions, of course, but
Okay. So why don't I give you, I'll give you a couple of notes or updates, things that I made note of that are probably of interest. I'll answer some questions as best I can. And then I have an 11:30-ish deadline that I have on the other end. So we'll try to go through as much as we can. So let's start with some of the, I don't know, good stuff. Something very significant happened yesterday. And I think sometimes we tend to focus on the challenges and we then overlook some really monumental pieces of legislation. So yesterday, a very impactful bill passed the Senate, was bipartisan. It's called USICA, which is the U.S. Competition and Innovations Act, which includes a bill that Senator Schumer authored, or what was part of, which is the Endless Frontiers. And why that's significant is it's a large investment, about $250 billion into domestic supply chains, innovation, research and development in really targeted microelectronic industries, energy components, chip fab, semiconductors, to help make sure that we bring into our shores as much, you know, manufacturing as possible to protect us from the vulnerabilities when you're relying upon foreign sources for those critical pieces of infrastructure. And so places like Corning Incorporated and major, sorry, I'm really bad when it's 10:45 and I can't come up with words. You know, major industries that populate our state could be potential beneficiaries, but also really important and much closer to home is the benefits that could come to places like Cornell, where research and development investment in our institutions and bringing the accessibility of the STEM curricula to populations is going to be critically important for our long-term, you know, viability. So that's exciting, and that's something to celebrate that we have made it through the Senate. It'll go on to the House. Other kinds of industries, artificial intelligence is one, advanced communications, so 5G, you know, fiber, working on begin to protecting our domestic supply of optical fiber. Let me think if I overlooked anything. Advanced energy, I think I said energy. And then, you know, we'll see investment in like regional tech hubs. So, you know, there's a lot of work being done in the Southern Tier on the battery front. And I think Cornell, I don't know if it's proprietary, but I know that they are, you know, loosely working with things like Binghamton University on some of their battery center research to use their Nobel laureate as a centerpiece. So there's a lot of exciting things that happen. So I think we should start off celebrating progress and something that I know is really important to Senator Schumer. Another really exciting thing is the Biden federal judges have begun to move through the nomination process. And so I think it was yesterday. I'm sorry, I know today is Wednesday.
Yeah, two of
It could
them.
have been yesterday because we didn't really have a session on Monday. So yesterday, which feels like 6 years ago. Julian Neals, I think Nealis is the first one, to the federal district courts. Regina Rodriguez is coming up, and there's a few others, including a notable nominee for the DC Circuit Court judges, which I have read. This is not proprietary. This is not a consumer opinion, but is on the short list for potential Supreme Court nominees. If we ever need one. Hopefully we have an opportunity if need be. And so what's really exciting is not only are we starting to restore the balance to the federal judiciary with some really diverse jurists, but it's really notable that these very qualified individuals represent the diversity that is indeed our country. And so that's really exciting. So Senator Schumer is excited about that. So that's a good couple of positive things. Since we were in Tompkins County and we talked about the investments in the Restaurant Revitalization Fund as part of the American Rescue Plan, and I know when I come to Ithaca, I certainly like to enjoy the culinary scene. I know that that's a critical, important part. You may have followed that in mid-May, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund opened up for applications. It was just shy of a $29 billion allocation as part of the American Rescue Plan. Within a week's time, that portal had to be closed because of the, no surprise, excessive demand and need. The last factoid I had seen, which probably takes us back to somewhere in that time period, there was about $65 billion in requests from over 260,000 some enterprises around the country. And so Senator Schumer critically recognizes the need that we need to replenish that fund, is very supportive of doing so. If any of your constituents or concerned entities are asking, obviously we need a legislative vehicle to do so. Senators Sinema and Wicker, it was a bipartisan effort on the Restaurant Act, are working to engage the caucuses to try to replenish funds. We do not have a bill yet because we do not have adequate support from our friends on the other side of the aisle, but the chambers of commerce are working, the restaurant advocacy groups are working. And so if you hear anything, obviously it's wildly successful because it's wildly needed. And we're very committed to trying to replenish those funds. So let's move into some of the more interesting things that have happened this week. So it is Infrastructure Week for I don't know how many number of times. And as you know, President Biden began this topic, I don't know, a month ago, something like that, with the introduction of his jobs proposal, which was a sweeping investment in both literal infrastructure and more figurative infrastructure, but things that we would all agree, or Senator Schumer would agree, are sort of the backbone of how we can operate as a society. There have been various tranches and back and forth going on in terms of trying to figure out the answer. A couple of the two keystones in that debate are, should infrastructure be the literal infrastructure, so bridges, roads, sewers, broadband, or should it be expanded to include those more figurative pieces of infrastructure like, childcare and other components to support families and individuals making their way through society. The other sort of debate is how to pay for it. So there is one push to have that be sort of a recirculation or a recapture and redistribution of already allocated funds from whether it be, the American Rescue Plan monies or some of the other COVID pieces of legislation that haven't been spent yet. The other debate is to have it be new monies. And so we do not have agreement or a plan. President Biden had met for some time with Senator Capito about sort of a bipartisan effort, and the rug was pulled out on that, I guess, last evening. There are, as reported, a couple of other efforts going on to look at proposals. One of them is the House Problem Solvers Caucus, and then the other one is another bipartisan group of senators that both Senator Sinema and Manchin are part of, as well as Senator Cassidy. We also, as a majority, are looking at other options to try to move things forward. But there is certainly a recognition that these investments need to be made. We need to shore up our literal infrastructure, but also, help advance the needs of those other sort of more not literal pieces of infrastructure. But we are working in those tranches. I don't have anything else to report on where we're at with that. But I suspect that July will be a very heavy, intensive effort to try to move things forward. A big lift for the infrastructure piece. One of the questions that I do get asked a lot is how can localities prepare or get ready for this? And, I don't have a great answer. Obviously, put your thinking caps on, because who knows what we're going to ask you to think about. People harken back a lot when they talk to me to what we did with ARRA, which was the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act in 2009, 2010. And I know I probably was calling you and asking you, do you have shovel-ready projects? And the state was doing so. That may be something to think about. I suspect that, we will see if and when we have an infrastructure bill of some kind, that there will be, more sizable, massive amounts of monies that we move to federal agencies that they will stand up competitive grant programs for. But what I don't expect that the bill will look like will be sort of an amalgamation of specific, earmarked projects, if you will. It'll be more pots of money for entities to compete with. And I will note that one of the discussion points, and we'll get to some of the other things, and we'll talk about Senator Manchin a bit, but he's at the forefront of some of these conversations as an advocate for rural America. And so I do think it's worth noting that one of the parts that he's very supportive and advocate for are rural carve-outs. And while in many ways we don't necessarily think of the city of Ithaca as being rural, it is part of the more rural part of our state. And what is good to note is that advocacy to protect rural America means that a piece of infrastructure that you may need, waterfront development along the lake, for example, wouldn't compete with the Gateway project, which is critically important to Senator Schumer in our state, but just are in different pots. So there is an intention to try to make sure that there is some parity in terms of how resources may be allocated as these conversations move forward. So that's that. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else. So let's see. I think everybody probably is interested in S1 and the voting rights. Goes without saying, the threats to our democracy are real and of utmost concern to Senator Schumer, is evidenced by the fact that the very first bill that became part of the Congress that he presides over as majority leader is S1. We've all seen the reports that Senator Manchin is not going to be supportive of that, and currently does not support, modifications to the filibuster, which is, an obstacle to bringing this and many other things forward. What would I say on it? I think Senator Schumer's resolve to go big and to go bold and to keep everything on the table hasn't changed. The recognition of how significant this threat is hasn't waned. I think it's important to remember nothing is easy. If it was up to Senator Schumer and Senator Schumer alone, this would have been done quickly and we wouldn't be talking about it at this part. But this is part of, the obstacles of managing a diverse caucus. And I will say that, Senator Manchin hasn't closed the door on talking about reforms to protect voting rights. He's very much, as he said publicly, of the mindset that, he can bring some Republicans along. So he's going to work to do that. But, we're in the hard part of negotiating. And I will say that, Senator Schumer has always excelled in bringing people together and managing some of these varying viewpoints and perspectives. So, he will put his nose to the grindstone and see where we can move forward on. And with respect to the filibuster and Joe Manchin, you might have questions on it, but I just, I think it's fair to note that, there are going to be other matters before us that are critically important. We could have a Supreme Court justice decide to resign, or to retire, I guess is probably a better way to put it. And, Senator Manchin will be critically important to us in making sure that we get a qualified, balanced member to the bench. We have issues about needing to still address gun reform in this country. And again, Senator Manchin being part of our caucus is a critical part there. So, Senator Schumer, I think overall remains hopeful that we can continue to work together, that we can, I think having bipartisan efforts like the USICA bill I talked about is great, but he would tell you if he was sitting here with me, which I'm glad he's not, by the way, that, everything is on the table and, we are working through all options to try to do the best and the right things for our country. That's a lot. That's our June. I don't think I overlooked anything in terms of what is on the immediate just checking my scribble to see. We did judges, we did. All right, so if you have questions, why don't we move over to that, and then I'll make sure I haven't not thought of anything while we're talking.
Thanks very much, Amanda. Yeah, you have some questions? Let's start though with committee members. Deborah?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. We're glad to see you today. I actually have 3 questions. First one is about the SECO bill. I'm reading in the press that it faces some issues in the House. Is that true or not?
I have seen some of that. I'm not versed enough in the House process that I could speak to that entirely. I think that we are very pleased that it made it through the Senate, which was, obviously a really important hurdle. And Senator Schumer will work with Speaker Pelosi and knows that he can on the other side to move it forward because he's very passionate about this. There's a lot to be gained, I think, across the spectrum. And, I think the Senate is the standard bearer of, we did this together. And so hopefully we can we can see that happen on the other side.
Yeah, it was surprising to me because usually it's the other way around. I also read that you're considering pushing the infrastructure bill through in reconciliation.
So that is certainly being reported. And I think that, when you play a game of chess, you don't necessarily telegraph every single move that you may make, because obviously you want to win. But, as he has said 1,000 times, everything is on the table. And the reconciliation process is certainly an option before us. And, I think it has been reported that there have been conversations with this parliamentarian along those lines. Obviously, the reconciliation process, along with the Byrd rule that is part of that process, someone has a more narrow focus in terms of how one can utilize that. But, much of this would sort of fit into that, guys. And so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is Senator Manchin the only problem, or is Senator Sinema also an issue?
Well, I won't use problem or issue because we are a big tent with a lot of a diverse caucus, and so if you're asking about in respect to the filibuster or S1, Senator Sinema is a co-sponsor to S1.
Okay.
Senator Sinema is not necessarily supportive of some of the rule changes, but her, and I want to be so bold as to speak for Senator Sinema, but her co-sponsorship is evidence of her, obviously support of the tenets that are contained within the bill.
She's but my impression is she's also trying to work out a bipartisan deal on the infrastructure bill.
Yeah, she is one of the secondary, and I don't mean secondary because they're more or less significant, just
right.
The next level of work. There is a bipartisan group of senators that Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema and Senator Cassidy are working on together to come up with another iteration of an infrastructure bill. So she is part of that group.
But does that mean that she's necessarily opposing Biden's version of the bill?
I'm not versed on every single tenet she supports or does not support, because remember that jobs proposal is massive. But obviously her participation and her effort is evidence of the fact that she wants to see us move forward in the space of infrastructure. So I would take that as a helpful sign as opposed to.
Thank you.
Other committee members? All right, I'll jump in with a couple of mine. The John Lewis Act is also on voting issues. And where are Manchin and Sinema on that? And if you could help us understand the differences, that'd be great.
So I'm probably the worst person to explain some of that, only because we get into very legalese territory. And taking the law firm, I realized that was not for me. But the very top line answer to the differences is that I am told that John Lewis does not fix and this is not going to be the correct term, but it's a very layperson term, the structural problem that affords latitude for state legislature, Republican controlled at this point, state legislatures to make some of the maneuvers that we're seeing to hinder voting access rights, where the S1 proposal deals with some of those kinds of things. I don't know exactly today where either one of those senators are on this, but in the general space, you know, all of these measures are certainly on the table in terms of what we can move forward to protect our sacrosanct right to vote.
On the, one of the things that's been reported is that the Republicans want to, for the infrastructure expenses, want to repurpose unspent COVID monies.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what money, you know, what buckets appear to be not spent? Are they funds that are allocated but are meant to be spent over time? Or, for example, we were talking earlier about New York State not spending all the childcare money from the original CARES Act. So, you know, it would seem that it matters what reason that those, whatever the monies are.
Right. Yep. I understand your point in the distinction. I don't honestly know exactly what buckets. I believe in what I have seen is that it would certainly be older COVID monies, not those that which have most recently been, you know, I mean, obviously like the American Rescue Plan, just probably this week or last week, you all probably started to see your first tranche of the state and local relief funds. So it probably looks at older monies. And what buckets they're in, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you, and I wouldn't want to misspeak. I can certainly check into that a little bit. I think some of the conversation, I don't want to say it's conceptual, but I haven't seen a lot of specificity on we should take, you know, program X and repurpose it because after, you know, with the justification that after a year we haven't spent enough, you know, we haven't spent down the monies to acquire PPE, let's say, for example. I haven't seen that specific, but I can certainly look into that a little more.
Okay, it seems like that might be a great place to find money for the restaurant fund if that's the, you know, if there really are funds we don't need for PPE or testing.
I use PPE as just a complete random example.
Right.
I have not seen anything. I mean,
Sure.
I don't want anybody to not have PPE ever again. So in my mind, we should always have PPE. But
Right.
yes, I hear you. And I think we would, you know, agree that rather than, you know, recapture funds that were dedicated to the survival and the, you know, beginning to rebuild from the pandemic, that we probably have a lot of work to still do before we just start calling it over and clawing it all back.
Okay, Mike Lane.
Good morning, Amanda, and thank
Morning.
you for being here. On the president's tax bill, we're already hearing, I'm an attorney, and I'm already hearing people in my practice with the shudders about the increased possibility for capital gains tax. They're talking about selling properties before that goes into effect, you know, whether it's going to go into effect or not. And to me, it can put a damper, I should say, on economic development. Wondered what you're hearing on that, if anything.
To be honest with you, I personally am not hearing a ton. That doesn't mean that there's not discussion points. I don't spend a lot of my policy space in the sort of the tax world, but I have very smart colleagues who do. So I can see if I can get you any, you know, current state of play updates, and I'll be happy to circle that back with you. But I don't want to tangle with an attorney and
Well, I'm not a tax
ill-advise.
attorney, but thank
There's
you.
three of
That's
them
fine.
on this.
That's
I'm
right.
just not done telling you. There's a reason why I'm doing this and I'm not doing that. Are there any specific points you would like made? Obviously, I hear you. I hear something from, you know, your experience that there's concerns about dampering sort of economic development by moving that forward. Is there anything else that I can take back?
Well, just that, of course, the intricacies of tax with economic development are very strong. You know, when a deal's put together, you stop. After you put the deal together, you stop and think, now what are the tax consequences? And that sometimes can kibosh a deal. So we have to think about that as we go along and how it affects our economy. I just wanted to point out that even down at this local level, we're hearing that right away about the capital gains tax.
Mike, would that mean people want to sell, but if there are people who want to buy those assets, is that a problem?
Well, they're thinking twice. They're thinking and how much they're willing to pay changes because eventually they're going to have to sell. And we know locally with real estate, we've heard from our assessors that people are paying much higher than just a multiple of rents received from properties, because what they're looking for is the increase in value and eventual sale on that. But if they have to pay a stronger capital gains tax, they're going to have to reevaluate that.
Additionally, that also, in the space of economic development, new construction too, because the costs of commodities have skyrocketed so much that what it costs to build a home is not reflective of the value of the home that you've built.
I had a builder in this morning telling me that a 2x4 costs $11.
I just put in perspective, our restaurant has an outdoor dining space that last year we were to put a pergola on it. The outdoor dining space seats 80 people. I don't know the dimensions, but just think about that. It was supposed to cost about $3,500, and our contractor had an injury, so we put it off to this year. He refuses to do the work, which is fine with me because the cost to do so now is $14,000.
Wow.
And that's, I don't even know the math.
Is there any investigation? Is this price gouging? I mean, like, why is this?
I am not smart enough to tell you any reason with certainty, but what I can hear, what I've heard anecdotally, and it's not just that particular commodity. There's multiple factors. I have wine, for example, that we sell in the restaurant that we have some Italian wines that we cannot get to our restaurant because there's no buddy to move the truck. That it's, the shipping container that's in to transport it. I have heard a lot from other industries that they are challenged by shortages of people power. There are backlogs in production from, residual closures and quarantines and things like that. I would suspect, without, being smart to say that I'm an economist, I think this is just a convergence of a variety of factors, all largely attributable to the pandemic that we've gone through. That have made commodity pricing and its accessibility skyrocket.
Thanks.
Deborah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that what you're seeing in a lot of cases is 2 years worth of work now needs to be done all at once because nothing was happening last year. I mean, if you try, we have a really small piece of home improvement that needs to be done in our house, but it's involved enough that we can't do it ourselves. And we can't get anybody to come out and even look at it. So I think there's that. And then there's the supply chain problems.
And the demand. Realize that for the last
Right.
year and a half, those who were fortunate enough to not be adversely economically impacted from the pandemic, I've read a lot because I find this interesting about the disposable income that so many people were able to build because they had no resources or avenues to spend it. And so the few areas where funds could be spent, home improvements, upgrades to what, whether you're changing your house, pools. My neighbor owns a pool installation company. He's booked out till 2024.
Holy cow.
So I think I'm no economist. I can only speak anecdotally, but I think it's just a convergence of so many factors, positive and negative, that we're going to have to kind of right the ship, so to speak. But we keep, obviously we do our best to keep an eye on it. And I think that, there are a lot of astute members who provide us good insight on the challenges but I don't know of any specific quote price gouging, effort being investigated at the moment.
Okay. Mike Ziegler, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I figured it was kind of time that I said something because I'm glad the conversation has kind of turned to this. We spent a lot of time talking about Manchin and about other things that the people I'm talking to, that's not what they're talking about. I go to a lot of businesses. I probably go to 20, I sell advertising. So literally in about 20 businesses a day. And, the price of plywood or sheet of plywood is $50 now. It was $7 and it was 28 just 4 months ago. You can't buy a lawnmower. You can't buy a tractor, it seems. All this stuff is out. If you went and you wanted to buy even a boat or a Sea-Doo, a jet ski, they're gone. So, I'm looking at floors, whereas they would buy advertising, but they're like, listen, Mike, I don't have anything to sell. And, we can talk about the voting and all the bigger issues, but that's the stuff that people are talking about. And they're wondering, and we can say, yeah, it's multiple issues. I agree with you. Some of it's greed, but a lot of it isn't. A lot of it is they can't get it off the boats. But I don't think enough people are kind of know that. They're wondering kind of what's going on, and it's kind of freaking them out a little bit, to be honest with you. When I'm driving with my 15-year-old daughter and I point out that gas is $3.03, she goes, "Wow, yeah, I that's a lot." That she recognizes because she's got a job. She recognizes, wow, that's up 15 cents in 2 weeks. And for a 15-year-old to be recognizing that, you got to imagine people people driving to work and commuting are looking at that going, they don't know what's going on. So just, I'm glad we turned the conversation in that direction.
Another factor that is recent that compounds all of that is some of the cyber attacks that we've had. That meat processing facility that was hit.
JRS, I think.
Yeah, I was trying to think because I know we have a supplier at the restaurant that has the same. Anyway, for such a short hit, I think I read they do 70 some % of all of the processing in the country. Again, I guess it's interesting. Sometimes I shudder that my husband owns a small business, but it's incredibly instructive and helpful in the job that I do and the advice that I give sometimes. But we do steaks, and the price jumps overnight were unbelievable. So, and I think it was Christopher Wray was just talking about these cyber threats to our country and, how real and just jaw dropping that they are.
And it slams the supply chain.
It instantly. And so, I think that, we have to take notice. Gasoline a couple of weeks ago, this now. In case our plate's not full enough, obviously we need to begin to make sure that we're doing the work to talk about those things too, because even as we work our way through the pandemic, those aren't necessarily pandemic specific challenges.
Yeah, I feel like that's a wake-up call that's been long overdue. And, I'm glad people are paying attention to it. I hope that cryptocurrency is brought into this conversation, which really is the great enabler of this whole enterprise. I do have another different area of questioning, but go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to wrap up with saying, I was impressed with the legislation that just went through to fund some of the scientific research. And for all the talk we do about, we can't get along party-wise and bipartisanship, there is no bipartisanship left anymore. It seems like when there is a big issue like that's something that could cripple the country, you do get bipartisanship. So maybe if we invested a little more time kind of like in that direction, speaking as the Republican on the call, I think we advance things a lot faster. So
I would, obviously I think Senator Schumer would agree with you that, doing things collaboratively is always the first precedent or preference. And I think that's a great example that it can be done. I think I would argue that some of the threats to our voting rights could cripple our country a heck of a lot faster, or just as quick as threats to our supply chains and our investment in technologies. I would hope, I would say that, hopefully that lesson that we saw going through the USICA process, we could extrapolate that and apply it to some of the other threats. But it is important to note that it can be done and it has been done. And that's why I started off talking about USECA first, Mike, because it's something that Senator Schumer is really proud of, and it is evidence that there can be work together.
As I said, I had, let me ask you a quick question. I'd like to go to Henry, who hasn't asked much, and then Deborah. Amanda, you and I met with one of the other staff people in Washington and Miranda Phillips about the Carbon Fee and Dividend, the Carbon Fee and Dividend Act. And I know in the infrastructure bill, there is conversation about energy projects. Are energy pieces, and by the way, I would prefer it be called human infrastructure rather than figurative infrastructure. But are energy projects considered controversial, or is there, as Republicans are negotiating, are they willing to have investments be on clean energy and that angle?
I think that the investment in the energy infrastructure is an important part of Biden's proposal. The clean cars proposal that Senator Schumer is an advocate for and crafted is part of that discussion. And that's part of the, green jobs, right? The investments in those things are a big part of how President Biden has talked about making expansions of job opportunities, employment opportunities in new industries and such in our country, while addressing one of the biggest existential threats to our survival, which is climate. I think we know that a lot of those pieces are controversial. We don't have a actual proposal that I can point to say, yes, this is in and this is not. So I think it's an evolving work in process, but obviously it is something that is important to the majority leader and something that should be included as part of our investment infrastructure.
Thank you. Henry.
Yes, thank you, Amanda, for all you've said. I know that one of the issues that has been swirling around has been unemployment numbers in terms of people not being able to hire people, because I know it was an article last week that the city of Ithaca has the lowest unemployment rate compared to 2020 in the state as a city. But many of the employers are talking about not being able to find people jobs, not being able to find workers for their jobs. And I know that 25 Republican governors have cut off the federal benefits. I was wondering what's the speaker's analysis of that, and how we're going to go forward.
In respect to what? The current
the current rates of people not applying for jobs. I mean, there's all this concern that our hotel industry, hospitality industry, doesn't have enough workers to survive the summer. But we know
You need a national minimum wage, Henry.
So, Henry, I will tell you that if you can see the bags under my eyes, but that is from somebody who has not had a day off probably since March. And I always say that being exhausted because you are privileged to have a job is an okay place to be. So I have not a complaint. But the lack of days off is because, I have been working in my husband's, I call it his restaurant. I'll reap any of the benefits if that ever happens, but until then, it's all his thing. Because we are always we're short, and so I feel that as a relative of a business owner. How's that? Senator Schumer was an advocate for the pandemic unemployment. Back when we were in the initial throes of that, we expanded the universe of who could be eligible. We expanded the pandemic unemployment was at first initially a $600 figure a week. And, I'm not naive to the fact that, if you look at figures, for example, and I'm not going to quote them right, but I think it was the Times did an analysis in the aftermath of the introduction of pandemic unemployment and how it turned the course on poverty fulfillment.
Right.
And I know that in my business, that provided disposable income to people who through no fault of their own suddenly found themselves without a job, and that helped keep the people that worked for me afloat. The reimagined pandemic unemployment at $300 a week sunsets the middle of September. And, it will be interesting to see what factors and what statistics look like post that versus now. But, Senator Schumer is a big supporter of that. We need to raise the federal minimum wage. We need to pay workers, a fair dollar, which certainly would, incentivize work, I suppose. But, he remains committed to that. And, I think, again, I am no economist, but looking at the various numbers and the, surveys and the things that have been done, it seems that there are, again, just like we talked about commodity pricing and accessibility of the supply chain, sort of a convergence of a variety of issues. And it's really hard to tease out one as evidence for, the main cause when we have such a swirl of factors going on. So hopefully, as we return to, a more version of normal where people are engaging in society, we up our vaccination rates, which are, really the key here. So I'm sure everyone here has been vaccinated, but I can't get the shot. We shall see. But I think part of, any policy or any discussion is certainly to be able to hear from multiple stakeholder groups and how they're impacted and what they see as the challenges and how to make things better. And, I will tell you, I am not shy as a small business owner to share some perspectives that, I see, which may be different than others. And it's part of the conversation. I know it's not a great answer, but, I think we're sort of treading water as we hopefully near the end of the most dire of all these circumstances.
Thank you.
I was thinking that micro timing, schools are ending now. People may want to take a week off and go see grandma. I support going to see grandma. And
Me too.
then like maybe later in the summer, it may really people will say, okay, now I'm going to start looking. So, it's really tough, but maybe better in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Deborah, you had your hand up earlier. I'm sorry.
No, the moment's passed.
Okay. Anything else for Amanda? We are delighted to have this real relaxed time to talk with you. We really appreciate it. And I had thought the Cornell folks would be on right now and that they would probably have questions or things to add in as well. One thing, it's sort of a natural experiment where I think 24 states have already stopped that extra unemployment, the extra $300. So like as of this week or so, it might be an interesting experiment to see if they actually have people coming back to work at a higher rate than the states that have continued that. I tend to feel like if people really don't have anywhere for their kids to be, that $300 only helps them put food on the table and doesn't keep them from taking a job. Deborah?
It just seems to me that that's like forcing people or starving people into accepting low wages that they shouldn't have to accept. That's just.
Yeah. So, Henry?
Yes, Amanda, one quick question. I've heard that Senator Schumer is pro-marijuana legislation. I wonder whether you have anything whether he's going to bring that up this cycle.
Yes, he is. I'm enthusiastic about that. Obviously, from there's a social justice piece to be dealing with that. There's some economic arguments. There's some criminal justice maintenance arguments. So there's a whole host of reasons. As we know, New York has gone forward, and he is working on a measure with Senators Wyden and Senator Booker that we have done in concert with a lot of the key sort of marijuana justice and advocacy groups. And I think the proposal will hopefully be rolling out sooner rather than later. But it is something that he's very committed to.
Thanks.
Right. I understand there's a lot that is like you put stuff on the table knowing that it's not going to move forward in the current politics, but it's important, very important to put things on the table anyway, and sort of state and begin the discussion, normalize a discussion like that, and make sure people feel that, yeah, this is something we can consider. And there are a lot of non-ideological reasons to consider legalization, for example. So,
Indeed.
So,
Indeed.
so I am interested in the carbon fee and dividend. Has that discussion evolved in any way? Is that something?
I do not have any updates on that. That doesn't mean that they haven't, that there hasn't been. I'll be honest, my bandwidth is, I'm drinking out of a fire hose, and I've gotten very good at it, but the fire hose can only be so big. So I can check on that. Obviously, there are lots of various discussions in that entire space going on, but I haven't personally seen anything moving forward or not moving. But I'll circle back with my colleague Tim Ryder to see if there's any additional updates. I have certainly heard the folks that we met with, they're great with sharing information for us to be aware of, and that's helped inform our understanding and conversations that we have. So they've been great with that. So we do have that. You have to walk and chew gum at the same time. So
Oh, I know. No, and the piece of information that really drove this home for me was the fact that as of January 2023, the European Union has already voted they will institute a tariff on any nation that wants to export to the EU that doesn't have a carbon fee, doesn't have a carbon price. So if something doesn't get passed in this Congress, I mean,
Businesses are going to suffer.
This is it. We're going to, all of our businesses that export to the EU are going to really be damaged. So it seems like it's time to really face the music on this. So I know you understand that. I know Senator Schumer does too.
indeed. So one thing we didn't touch on, and I don't know how I could have overlooked that, but is the congressionally directed spending endeavor that we all are going through with the earmarks. So just like a little update on that, because that's something that I know Tompkins County is well represented in the submissions that we had. And so probably everybody knows the inaugural season for the congressionally directed spending request was launched late in the budget year. I think it's been about 10 years since we had earmarks, and didn't think that we necessarily would, but we kind of got to a place where on the Senate side, the decision was made not to prevent or object to members who wanted to do so. So, it's all steam to go, and we are working through our internal process of compiling all of them, and working with the senator to update him and give him some overviews on what the projects are. And we expect that probably next week, I think, is when we'll be submitting what we have received to the committees, and we'll be working through that process. So I'll be just another fire hose item. I've been the last week and a half, we had quite a robust process. So we had lots to vet and to learn and to talk to stakeholders and to understand. And, there's some really interesting things that came through, and be excited to see how New York will fare as we go through, but we will certainly advocate for as much as possible. And hopefully it'll be a good process, and an acceptable one that we can continue to fine tune it and have it be part of our regular annual budget process, as opposed to what we've been doing for the last handful of years.
Thank you. You're right. How did we forget? I think we forgot because county government did not actually put anything in. So, but I think we're all aware of some different projects. So
lots of your constituents did. So
yes, the timing, we might know by August or so whether things are moving forward. Or
in the days of old, that was really the first glimpse of when committee reports would come out, so we could see what committees were appropriators were choosing to include to go forward. Theoretically, everything all has to be buttoned up by the end of September, ready to start October 1st of the fiscal year. I don't remember the last time I've seen that happen. So it would be very speculative of me to say when things could be finalized, but when we get into next week or so, and Senator makes his submissions public, that'll be the first glimpse of what's been submitted. And then probably somewhere before the August recess, but I'll be honest, I would think probably when we return from August recess, we'll see work coming out of the, the appropriation committee.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I want to respect your time, and we really, really do appreciate your being here, Amanda. It's great to have a chance.
Well, thank you for always wanting to hear from us. So I appreciate that. And I will, the few notes that I made on follow-up, I will see what I can get on capital gains issues, on the carbon tax thing, Martha, that you asked me about. And then any thoughts or discussions on where funds might be recaptured in the previously allocated COVID response. And if I missed anything, feel free to text me to remind me.
Okay, and we certainly support refilling the pot for restaurants. Tell your husband.
Yeah.
Well, we don't qualify, so I guess that's a good thing. But yes, I support for all of my fellow restaurateurs and the industry, certainly to have a chance at survival.
Yes,
So.
absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thanks.
Afternoon.
Be well.
You
All
too.
righty.
Bye now.
Take care. Bye. So this is interesting. Usually the Cornell folks are, let me see, let me check my email. Charlie can't get the invite. Oh dear. Okay. He gets it. I know he got it. Let me see. Katrina, can you resend it to him? I know he got it. I checked.
I will go ahead and do it right now.
Okay. I'm going to write him back.
Yeah, I know the Republicans are trying to pay for the infrastructure bill by taking away the second tranche of money from the ARPA. Yes,
What?
yes, they're trying to take away the second payment, the ARPA, to basically be able to fund for the infrastructure bill.
Well,
Okay.
that's good to know now as we move into the process of figuring out what we're going to do with that money.
I guess that
Yes.
is, yeah, until you've cashed the check.
That's exactly right. The
Right.
government giveth and it taketh away.
Henry, is that why your hand is up to add that in?
Yeah, that's why my hand is up. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did
they
you just
also-
find out about that?
I found out about like last week, but they said the Democrats rejected the offer, and also the Republicans basically said it's a non-issue that they're going to cut. They're going to touch the Trump tax cut either, and so they're balancing between those two issues.
Yeah,
And so they have to come up with other funding.
I think that's the harder nut to crack than how much to spend, or even what to
Or
spend.
how we're going to pay for it.
Yeah, that's the harder thing. So, all right. Well, I know, I mean, I did write back to Charlie. We can tap dance for a little while. I think that's interesting about the earmarks. We'll see. You know, I know of a couple of projects that were submitted. Town of Dryden submitted an earmark. You know, I know of a couple of other things, but so we'll see about that. The carbon fee and dividend. This is when Deborah, you shook your head, nodded your head, and this is like, that's a train wreck about to come. If people
Yes,
don't,
it is.
like, hello, it's like, really? So I hope that there's some awareness of this, and it seems to me it could easily get passed if the infrastructure bill, whether it goes as negotiated or it goes through reconciliation, seems to me it's clearly within the definition of what qualifies for reconciliation. And it seems like this is the train that's leaving the station. They should get that in there. This was the pitch we made with Tim Ryder and Amanda, Miranda, I'm sorry. Wait, Miranda and I made with Amanda and Tim. And Miranda said that there are people with a citizens climate lobby making this case to the to the White House and to the administration. This is not something that is a secret to them too. So
I think a problem, Martha, is the fact that taxing carbon in any way, shape, and form has been wedded in conservative minds with the notion of climate change and green infrastructure and a whole lot of other things. And there'll be pushback just on the basis of that. And I don't mean at your level of the Republican Party, Mike, before you get upset. I'm just talking about, Mitch McConnell and that, the party of no group up there in Congress. I think that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and I hope that, I think this is one of those really practical things that really doesn't have to, shouldn't be an issue. All right, I also just got from Kate Supron that she didn't get the invitation. So I'm gonna send this to Kate and to Charlie, see if they can get in.
And meanwhile, we should give Mike a chance of fair response.
I was just going to say that the carbon tax actually got bipartisan support.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, Tom Reed had signed on to it, and it just
I'm
never
talking
went.
about the Senate more than.
Well, it's got to start somewhere, and that's when the Republicans, had the House. So it wasn't. I think most people have figured it out, though. If you do a carbon tax, it's just going to raise the price of gas and heating oil and natural gas.
That's why the dividend is so important. The dividend part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why actually when it was brought in front of the legislature, that's why I voted for it was, if you're saying that the money's going to come back, then that's great. But if it's just going to be like the lottery money that goes to education, then what's the point of doing that?
Charlie, hi.
Hey.
I don't know what happened. I just saw, and I see Kate looks like she's coming in too. You're on mute, Charlie.
My fault. I'd forgotten when the meeting started, so that's why it was sort of buried under other invites. Sorry about that.
Hi, Kate. Oh, well, we just move things around. I guess that's what we get for moving things around. So, but we did have a chance to hear from Amanda Spellacy, which we haven't for a while. So, how are things at Cornell, or how are things at Albany? Whichever you want to talk about.
Well, Cornell first. Go ahead, Kate.
I'm not sure we have much to report. Easing of restrictions took place for campus protocols on June the 1st. Different units are now examining how and when to repopulate campus. The decision is being made on a unit by unit level. So there's not, it's not like on this day, everybody will be back on campus. Vaccination rates, I was just looking at the website. It says our on-campus population is at 83% vaccinated, 15,000 students, and 9,800 faculty or employees, which is quite a high rate for employees because we have, we have a lot of, we only have about 10,000. So a very high rate of vaccination for employees. So that's what I've got. We continue with community relations to have monthly community relations Greater Ithaca town halls with Joel and Charlie and others present to answer questions. And we're looking to schedule some pop-ins with the county, the city, and the town for August to just do a quick drop into your meeting. So I'll reach out about those. And as always, folks are welcome to reach out to us if you need information. Charlie, back to you.
I'll just add to that, so, right, just the governor announced the other day that when the adult population is more than 70% vaccinated, he intends to remove virtually, I don't think he said virtually all, but he said the majority of restrictions, pandemic related. Now, it's a little bit uncertain as to what they're going to do exactly, because higher ed really is not really its own industry. So we are hoping that when they remove the restrictions, they'll basically remove them from us. We know that K-12, homeless shelters, there are a few area hospitals, there are a few specific areas of the economy, is the way they look at it, that they are not going to just, say, go ahead and do whatever you please, go back to normal. But we think that there's a good chance that we will be able to, open more, not have restrictions on the number of researchers in a research area, the number of students in a classroom, very important for us, the distancing and things like that. So it would be great for us to be able to go back to normal in the fall. And that's what we're hoping. We just don't know yet what the state's going to permit us to do. So that's the update on that. Yeah, everything on campus, like Kate said, is looking really good. And we're preparing, hoping for the best. And, I guess we have some backup plans, but just hoping that things open up and we go back to pretty much normal.
Sounds good. Sounds really good. Since we're relatively short on time, I wanted to jump to pick your brain, Charlie, on how do we move forward on some items as the legislative session is ending. We're becoming more aware that the executive budget preparation is really the big story that we haven't paid much attention to in the past, but we want to get ready and maybe see if we can do some, education on some issues with them. Also, we have just to say some concerns about sort of over-regulation really slowing down, like federal money moving out, or like the ERAP program and the childcare monies, et cetera. Anything you can suggest us about what we can do in the next, number of months?
Hard to advise, just because in a normal year, like you said, you'd have the executive agencies, you'd have division of the budget, you'd have the governor's office, governor's regional reps. You could talk to them, but they're so distracted, and I don't think this governor is going to survive, this year. I've been wrong so far. I thought they'd push him out earlier than this, but the session's ending, so it's almost like I don't know who you would even talk to. Who works in the executive branch right now. It's hard to figure. So I really don't have any great advice on that. I just think that if you see the behavior, the governor, this not really that relevant to you. It just sort of gives you his state of mind. He threw out all these nominations. He's trying to get people that are loyal to him to be confirmed in all these jobs across the state, authorities and agencies. It tells you he's, not going quietly. And some of them are really sort of controversial. And I think it shows that he is, sort of like a cornered animal, dealing with him or getting the attention of him and his staff. I think I don't really have great advice on that. I mean, we're going to be approaching Kathy Hochul on something economic development related, because that's in her wheelhouse. And we saw a report that Pat Foy is going to be the new head of the Empire State Development Corp. Now he's a real person. He worked for, I think he came in under Spitzer or under Patterson. And he's been running the Port Authority. But anyway, so again, it's like, I think you're totally right. I just don't know who to talk to right now to try to get on the radar screen for the next budget, because I just don't see Cuomo being in charge. Even if he is nominally in charge, I don't see him doing anything other than just trying to protect himself day to day.
Well, that's a cheery statement. And it'll be interesting because there were so many things in this state budget that were, well-funded, but well-funded with a lot of federal money.
Yes.
And what's going to happen next year? I mean, does that money kind of,
I know.
is there a 2-year bolus at least, or we don't know?
Yeah, they do have money for next year. They've got some put away. And again, I also think the forecast for the economy is very positive for this coming year. I think most people are worrying about the year after this one coming, at least the state fiscal year, that's when the money, when there's no more federal money. And that's when, hard to imagine they'll stop these programs. They've created new programs, and how do you tell people, oh, that was only a 2-year program. Sorry, we're not going to give you that money anymore. Hard to do that. So very tricky. So a lot of again, I don't have any answers for you, but I think most people are thinking the year after next will be a tough one. But I wish I had an answer to how to prepare people who would be putting the governor's budget together. But it's next to impossible for me to figure out who's going to be where, and I don't think it's really worth it to try to even if you could get the attention of somebody, I don't think they're going to be around. That's my guess.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Charlie.
I'm not, but it's true. And next
No,
year's
I know. It's just like everything is in flux. Yeah.
and next year's an election year too. So Mike Lane.
Hi, Charlie. I can't imagine you can tell us much more than you just did, and thanks for being honest with us. But I would think that we would still continue to send resolutions and other things like that, so that
Sure.
they're on somebody's desk when these issues come up. But Charlie, I was kind of interested. I don't think we've asked you this question before, but what would, to the extent that you can share, what are Cornell's legislative priorities coming up?
Yeah. So we always care about the budget because they do student financial aid, they do SUNY funding, which we get a portion of, and they do specific aid for, again, it's in the student financial aid category, a number of different state programs that are important to us because we supplement them. And, so that's a lot of money actually to Cornell that comes in through that. Again, a lot of it goes to students. But if they didn't do it, we would have to do more. So the budget's very important. And then there are always issues that either we need from them, or if they pass that bill, it'll be a problem for us. I'll give you an example. We needed the state to permit us to offer health insurance to our students. It was illegal. We couldn't do it until the state amended the law permitting us as a educational institution to offer health insurance to not our employees, but our students. And so, and then we've been tweaking that law every year since we had it passed. And then there are other laws that they passed, things like every institution, that every bank shall do such and such. And then they sort of, in law, they define what a bank is, and then they include any institution that loans any money to anybody. Well, we do that, okay? We loan money to our students. And so, those, and then we have to get that law either changed before it becomes law, because they can't make us do all the things they're gonna make a bank do. So we always have those big and little bills. And this year they were sort of an interesting, I think it was a coincidence, but fewer of those sort of annoying things. I think, frankly, because the governor was less active in having his agencies sort of score points and go after bad actors. And not that they go after us as a bad actor, but we usually get caught in these other networks of, banks, insurance, anybody who does that, anybody who sponsors anybody to traveling abroad shall blah, blah, blah. So we're often defining or redefining ourselves because they literally are not thinking about us first, across the state. They're not thinking about colleges, universities. They're thinking about, banks, insurance companies, aluminum manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies. So this year, again, it was a strange year. It's not over yet, but fewer of those sort of problem bills than normal. And I think it's because the governor was a lot less active. But again, a better year. Of course, the Martha said it. This budget was the biggest roller coaster I've ever been on. Where it went from so bleak to positive, and they did again biggest TAP increase in 21 years, 20% increase in some of the other student aid programs. So that was a very good year for higher ed in the budget. So, but we always have, like I said, we always have sort of Cornell only or higher ed bills that we're stopping or pushing.
Are there capital projects that Cornell would like to see funded by the state in the state schools and things that are going ahead? I think back on when they got the money for the vet school, for example.
There you go. So those are sort of special deals. So the vet school was a special deal through economic development money. And then we always have every year we have either rehabbing of a building, usually reconstruction of a building, or just fixing up older buildings. That's the student construction fund. It's usually not political. It's like Martha Van Rensselaer Hall, just finally rebuilt, reconstructed basically from like the whole thing. That was about a $45 million project. So major project. And so that's sort of every year we have one of those pretty much. But the special deals, the vet school is a special deal. A number of years ago, so I'll mention a couple coming up. 5-6 years ago, we got a $15 million grant, economic development money, to upgrade the synchrotron under alumni fields. And that led to a big federal investment. We're looking for another state investment of about that, maybe 12 million, for a big upgrade. It was sort of a different thing. It's called a magnet lab, where we're in line to get a big new federal grant that is basically an add-on to that synchrotron. And the big federal grant, the feds pay for the operating. They pay for your salaries, the equipment every year. The state government, they have a really hard time doing that. What they don't have a hard time doing is giving you a one-time grant of capital money that they classify as economic development, and they issue bonds for that. So this New York State has an easy time issuing state debt to finance that one time, particularly if it's leveraging, if it's bringing in federal money that's paying for workforce. So the first one of these for ERL, that was the Energy Recovery LINAC, was in the late 90s. We got a $12 million grant, economic development, from then Governor Pataki. And then 5 years ago, we got a $15 million grant. This is all to get the feds to keep investing, and it's worked. So the feds are now awarding us another $33 million to add on to this lab, for this magnet lab. And now we're looking for the state for something like $12 million to build a building that we can house that we can basically use as the house for this thing. So that's another upcoming. And then the last one I'll just mention real quick, earth source heat. We're looking to do a little bit of a research project to see if there's any way we could heat the campus through geothermal. And so we're planning to do a test well just to see if that's feasible, at Cornell, and that's later in the year. So again, those kinds of things, and that would be, we'd like the state to be involved in one way or the other, and we'll see if they get involved.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, very informative. Thank you.
Thanks. Henry, I'm watching the clock now. So Henry?
Yes. Thank you, Charlie. I was wondering what the legislative schedule is, like when does it end? When does it pick up again? Also, can Cuomo can he leave office, or can he be indicted sort of during the summertime?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah. So great question. So tomorrow is the end of the legislative session. I think, maybe Friday they finish up. They have a lot of stuff they're working on. But maybe Friday morning, Friday afternoon, both houses leave. They're ready to come back if they need to. I think they have to come back to start impeachment procedures, the process. I think they have to do that. I think they'll be away a short time, and then there'll be people making a lot of noise like, what are you doing home? He's still there. So I have a hard time imagining they're going to stay out of Albany for a while. I think the at least the assembly has to come back, and some of them have to like get busy on this impeachment thing. And I think they have to get them out in the next couple of months. I don't know how they, so that's my guess now. And nobody's talking about them coming back, but this is the year they would come back. Now, don't forget, New York City, where half the legislators come from, they're having a primary for, in a sense, an election for the mayor. So that's the big thing that half the members in Albany want to get out of town to get back there, because a lot of these legislators are running for another office. A lot of them are running for some local office, downstate.
Aren't they all running for
And so
mayor?
they're like trying to get out of here. Nobody's running for mayor, but a lot of them are, have their interests somewhere else locally, or running for city council, et cetera, et cetera.
So they are, thank you, Kate. Good to see you. So that's Assembly and Senate, are you saying? They have interest in downstate? Okay. All
And
right.
when do they come back?
Well, no,
theory?
there's no date scheduled for them to come back. They can come back if they want to come back. They can. The governor could call them back, but I think the assembly has to come back, and show that they're working on this impeachment thing. I don't think they may not want to. It looks like they don't really want to come back. They're in no rush, but I think they're going to be pushed to do it. I think that there are some loud members, particularly in the Senate, who are going to be beating on the assembly to do it. Now maybe maybe the mayor's race, that primary, maybe everything sort of stops until that's done. And that's the end of this month, right? So
June
maybe a
22nd,
month from now. Yeah, maybe it's a month from now. They get, okay, let's get back to, let's show that you're working on this impeachment thing.
All right, that's the mayor's primary race, the primary election explains why they're leaving early. I realize they usually go till later in June. So, okay. Hadn't thought about. Charlie, I love how you put things together that the rest of us don't realize. So now the assembly has an investigation going on, right? Hasty started an investigation about impeachment. Where does that stand?
Yeah, their Judiciary Committee is doing an investigation. At the same time, of course, the Attorney General has one. She's, the sense is hers is will be the real bombshell.
Okay.
The assembly, you almost get the sense they're doing it because they felt like they had to do one, their own, but they're not getting the cooperation from everybody that the AG is getting. And so
Okay.
I think the AG one is the one that everybody's expecting to really have the meat, but the assembly can't just say they're not doing anything. So
Okay.
again, I think the heat's on the assembly. The AG, I don't know about the timing of when she comes out with something. I have no idea. I don't know what's going on there, but I don't think that a couple months can go by and us seeing no progress on this impeachment. I don't think people will stand for that. That's my opinion. But
So are you running for governor?
yeah, right. I don't know. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I think that because there are so many members who know that the AG spot is how you become governor in New York historically. And so that's why I think a lot of people are backing our current AG to move up so that her spot comes open and they can run for it. So because a lot of these state legislators, they're looking for the next big office.
Right. One more quick question. I hope, I know we're over time now, but redistricting, we just passed a resolution about asking to be kept in one intact in the congressional and state senate districts. Do you have any update, any wisdom on where things are and how that's going to get caught up in all this or otherwise? What's the timing?
I have no update. It's a really great sort of a endeavor that you guys have. I think that just because I don't think everybody really understands the geography of New York. Really, a lot of these members, particularly the newer members, even the members who've been around a while, all they really know is their area, and they don't really know a lot about other areas. And I think the quicker we can educate them on, Tompkins County and what's there, I think the better. Because you know how it works. They do the numbers and then it's like, who wants this? Who wants that? How does that fit together? Does that work? And I think getting on the radar screen early is the way to go. I don't have any great advice, but I expect it'll be a similar process to what it's always been like.
Okay, I did make contact with Hal McCabe in Rachel May's office. Do you know Hal? He's also the
Yeah,
mayor.
and-
Okay.
Rachel, she knows.
Okay, and so he knows, so that office now knows, how we, what we'd really like. We're gonna send the resolution to them too. So, all right, it is, it'll be interesting. A lot of moving parts. So, anything else from the committee or from you, Charlie? All right, thank you so very much. Sorry you had trouble getting in.
Sorry.
It's great to have you. And,
Great.
we may end up being like back in person on for our next meeting. But we can still have you phone in from Albany, even though we'd love to have you in person, but we know that's unrealistic.
No, I make it over there. I'll be making it over there soon.
Okay,
Great.
excellent.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Charlie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. All right, anything else for the good of the order here?
Motion to adjourn?
All right, seconded by Henry. All in favor? Thank you, everybody. I think we.
Bye. Thanks, Martha.
All right, have a good
Thanks,
afternoon.
Katrina and Brittany.